Throughout the history of brands, every founder has dreamed of one thing: to be positioned upmarket, to charge more, without explaining themselves, without justifying the price, without negotiating their worth. They look at luxury and assume it's luck, talent, or history, that some brands are simply just allowed to charge more. But the secret is that luxury doesn't earn high prices. They psychologically engineer them just by positioning themselves. After working with multiple million-dollar founders, all that charge multiples higher than their closest competition, I'm going to tell you the secrets, the exact principles that these brands use, so you can command your prices and position yourself just like them. But before I tell you these principles, you need to understand where we are. You need to understand the history of luxury positioning. For most of history, expensive meant scarce. If something cost more, it's because it took more time to make. It required rare earth minerals or materials. It demanded specialized skill. Price reflected effort, and luxury was a consequence. But then something changed. In the early 20th century, industrialization collapsed the gap between effort and output. Factories made quality be reproducible, craft stopped being rare, and suddenly brands had a big problem. If quality could just be replaced, then how did they remain valuable? European fashion houses, well, they were the first ones to understand the secret, the first to understand how to exactly solve this. They realized that effort was no longer scarce, and if so, then perception had to be. So price stopped becoming a reflection and started becoming a bit more of a tool. Designers in Paris deliberately raised prices, not because costs increased, but because high prices created that perception and created that desire. And this right here was the birth of modern luxury, and it actually falls onto our first principle, and that is, if you want to be seen as expensive, just raise prices. And I know it sounds very obvious, and many people find it quite uncomfortable, but there's something very strange that happens when you become more expensive. It feels better to the buyer. But why? Why does something expensive feel better? You're paying more, so logically it should feel worse, right? But with no other information, if something is more expensive, then you just assume that it's better. This is because your brain is not designed to evaluate quality, it's designed to conserve energy. Every day your brain makes thousands of decisions, and to cope, it relies on shortcuts, fast rules that reduce effort. And these shortcuts are called heuristics. And one of the most powerful heuristics is, well, price. When something is expensive, your brain just assumes that it's better than the alternatives, because usually expensive means better quality, better service, and this happens instantly without any conscious thought. And luxury brands, they understand this. When two products look very similar, then pricing becomes a deciding factor, and choosing the more expensive option feels safer. It feels like a choice you can't be criticized for, the safe choice. So then if you increase prices just like a luxury brand, your customers or clients are going to assume that you're better than a competition. But charging higher prices doesn't automatically position your product or service as luxury, and it doesn't mean that you're going to get any sales. So this moves on to the second principle, and is best explained when luxury globalized. After World War II, mass production flooded the market, and more products came in. When brands started to get more customers and scale, they realized that there were actually two types of audiences: those who wanted to belong and those who already did belong. And pricing, well, it split accordingly. Entry-level luxury appeared, so fragrances, accessories, small leather goods, expensive enough to hurt the average consumer, but priced low enough that they could still access them. These products were designed to monetize aspiration, but still the flagship products always remained unreachable. You could just about buy from a brand, but not really fully be part of its world. And this right here is the second principle of luxury positioning: exclusion and inclusion. Deciding who gets full access and who doesn't, who's allowed to be part of the world, who even becomes a client or customer. The whole point of luxury positioning is that it doesn't try and close and convert everyone. It actually repels most people. Only a certain crowd who really believe in what you're selling, they are the ones you're allowed to buy. While most want to sell their flagship to as many people as possible, if you want your products and services to be positioned as luxury, you need to build a barrier. For example, for clients, we make sure they offer their best flagship services only to their ideal clients, who are certain to be a great fit and get great results. Because the moment something becomes accessible to everyone, it loses all that signaling power. And this is why luxury brands resist mass adoption, limiting supply, limiting distribution, avoiding discounts at all costs. Some brands would rather destroy unsold inventory instead of having a discount. The fewer amount of people that say yes, the more powerful that yes becomes. So let's recap. To be positioned as luxury, you need to be priced as the most expensive because you have the appearance of being the best option from the get-go. You need to only serve your best products to your ideal clients and customers and no one else. But something here is missing. How do you become irreplaceable? Well, this right here is what many luxury brands have taken decades to think about until they came up with something genius. Your price can be copied. Exclusion can be imitated. So, what makes you different? What makes you stand out if you can just be copied? In the 20th century, many luxury houses stopped competing on products and started to become irreplaceable. They started constructing worlds that people could go into. This world was built with story, what the brand stood for, why it existed, the philosophy it never compromised on. This story established ethos and meaning. But just as importantly, it defined the story of the buyer. When you're buying, what person does it make you? What does it make you feel? When you hire Ogilvy, a legendary marketing company, you're not just buying ads, you're buying the legacy of the world's best advertising campaigns. When you buy Apple, you're not just buying technology, you're buying into technological creativity. When you buy a Rimowa, you're not just buying luggage, you're buying into the lifestyle of travel, class, and sophistication. You're not just purchasing an object or a service. You're buying into a narrative that began before you and will continue after. This is why luxury brands obsess over heritage. Even young brands invent the past. Even modern brands reference tradition, because the brand's story builds the buyer's identity. The focus is never on what the product does, but on how they feel after owning it or using it. And this right here is the final principle of luxury positioning. Your brand needs a world, a clear point of view, a feeling you never break, a standard you never break, the feeling people have the moment they step into your brand. Because once your brand has a world, you're inviting people into an identity. So to recap, prices shape perception from the get-go, repel everyone except the right audience that preserves signaling power, and finally, luxury becomes irreplaceable by building a world, a clear story and identity that buyers step into. When these three principles come together, prices stopped being questioned, competition becomes irrelevant, and your brand is positioned up market by default. This is what makes a brand truly luxury.